Honestly, the jury is still out on the effects of gentrification.
Property values do go up. That's good for a lot of people. This whole idea that somehow the wealthy are pushing the poor out. I mean,
higher income or higher status people relocate to or invest in low-income urban neighborhoods.
From new development to resales,
it's free real estate.
And I'm a lesbian. I'm a lesbian, baby.
There's an old saying that you can know a place by the people who live in it, and if that's true, then New York is especially hard to pin down. The city sets itself apart with its widely recognized history, culture, and even an affordable housing crisis. Well, that last part depends on who you ask, so let's start with what we know for sure. A recent survey found that 65% of all city residents are currently scared of being priced out in future years. On a single 3-block stretch in Midtown, 57% of residences were empty at least 10 months of every year. More than 400,000 people rely on public housing in the city, with over 200,000 people on the waiting list, many of them waiting for years. In spite of these troubling numbers, Manhattan remains attractive to many, including the 60 million tourists who visit each year. And who could blame them? It's a beautiful city.
Obsessed with the DNA, like your bitch consumed emotions. Painted faces in costumes, emergency rooms, out of tune for big dummy moves. Ain't the struggle of war, not the source or the reservoir. Hardcore, straight to the heart, cold as the seafloor. Out in the bench, trying to see more. Feed me, ain't got shit in this lane that
everything wide open. And some certain shit used to be kind of sacred. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That shit over with. Like,
Do you think that's good or bad?
Man, some shit be so bad it's good. You know what I'm saying?
I'll have to take his word for it. As a young person, I've only ever seen the Brooklyn he knew through pictures. So how did we get here? If you're looking for understanding, the 1929 Regional Plan is a great place to start. New York was one of the earliest cities to implement gentrification as an intentional economic strategy. The city's current reliance on housing values for revenue began when executives with the Regional Planning Association rezoned the entire city and put out a plan that essentially predicted what the city looks like today. As Manhattan grew, Brooklyn and the Bronx were experiencing the effects of an official policy called benign neglect. Put simply, the city decided to abandon or neglect certain areas. During times of economic strength, the city might decide its poorest neighborhoods are, well, the cheapest or the easiest to revitalize, depending on who you ask. Brooklyn, like many other areas of the city, has already changed immensely, and there's no telling where the changes will stop. Before we continue with the story, let's define something called redlining. All you need to know is that there have been many widely established policies in the past that have directly impacted the ability of the poor, particularly non-white poor, to own homes, through direct denial as well as a cumulative loss of generational wealth over time. This might seem unrelated to the topic now, but just remember this term. It will come back up, I promise.
I had nowhere to go at first. Like, we actually had to sleep on a train a fucking night or two, and like found through somebody that I had worked with some like service that I could pay them to send me to an apartment. So the service almost wound up fucking me over. I got to an apartment that like after like I don't know, a couple of months or whatever, they started renovating the apartment next to our apartment, and like the next thing I knew is we're getting all bit up, like waking up in the morning with fucking like welts all over us and shit, and want to be in bed bugs. I'd never seen it before. $100 a week, but I was $150 a week. So I'll just leave this one fucking, and then then when I come back in a week or two, get an apartment for $100 a week again, like not realizing, remembering how hard it initially really was to get, you know. I bumped into a cop, like, I don't know, maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago, going through the subway, and like I jumped the fucking bar. I've gotten like a ticket once or twice, or gotten stopped by them once or twice, and like every time I always told them, like, yo, I've been having to do this since I wound up in the shelter, and like I just don't have the money to pay for it. The last time I said it to one of them, they were like, oh yeah, like you're not gonna be able to keep doing that, like they're coming down, like they're trying to like pay for extra cops to like, but I still really haven't seen any.
More love.
More love.
More health.
More health.
More peace.
More peace. New Year's Eve was approaching, and I had the good sense to get the hell away from Midtown. Will New York still be New York in a decade? That is to say, will it even be recognizable to us as the same city? Time is a strange thing.
And then they gonna give you whatever cash you got, but they own all that shit. So you wanna own your own shit, regardless. At the end of the day, you know what I'm saying? Own your shit.
Own your own shit.
Own your own shit.
Numerous studies, conducted by entities from the Federal Reserve to the Times, have isolated and identified one key variable in this puzzle. One factor that, in gentrifying neighborhoods, is one of the strongest predictors of whether or not people will be displaced. What's that factor? Home ownership. Residents that own property in gentrifying neighborhoods as opposed to just renting actually stand to reap the benefits of a so-called improving community. The communities most frequently targeted by gentrification are the very same communities that have faced the greatest obstacles to homeownership. Ever go back to the way they were? To be honest, I have my doubts in a city with only so much to go around and only so much power in the face of vast economic forces much larger than any of us. What I know for sure is there is no other city like New York, or its people. And if there's any city in the world to surprise, to be an exception, or at least to rise above, would be New York.
Conflux of many factors leading to the displacement of vulnerable, marginalized groups, typically in urban spaces, for the benefit of a more privileged class. That kind of wraps it.